All right, so let's talk about emotions. Okay, we're going to start off with just a general set of questions about what emotions are. Um, we're going to talk about theories of emotions and evolutionary explanations for emotions. Then we're going to talk about how emotions might relate to cognition, what effect they might have. And then finally, we'll talk about a particular way that they affect cognition. And this is about predicting the future, not just understanding the present or remembering the past, but how we think about the future. Relevant background here is going to be Amo in the history of philosophy was pointing out that we should think about the relationship of the mind and the body a little bit more. It's all of the embodied stuff that we've been talking about is going to be directly related to this, including the somatic marker hypothesis and just evolution in general. I think if you've been following the class at this point, we've been foreshadowing our discussion of emotions most every time. So the fact that it's related to a lot of stuff that we've talked about should not be a surprise. And the big picture lesson from this lecture is going to be that we have these things that we call emotions that are fast and can influence all sorts of aspects of our thinking. Um, we can push ourselves into emotional territory, into various emotions, but also there's a sense in which they're outside of our control. And in fact, there's a sort of a feedback mechanism between emotions and the rest of cognition. A couple of decades, actually many decades ago now, Paul Ekman had this idea that cross-culturally people could identify 6 facial expressions. And as a result, these were the 6 basic emotions from which everything else is derived. Let me see if I can identify these. There's anger, there's fear, there's contempt, there's I thought contempt and disgust were 2 of them. Sorry, surprise, joy, and sadness. Other people have thought maybe there are a few more basic emotions. Maybe there's certain axes you can talk about. 8 primary emotions that Plutchik talks about, and how that they might be direct opposites of each other. People have proposed any number of these divisions. I have a general skepticism when it comes to discussing these sorts of divisions of any concept, any topic, senses, ideas, personalities, emotions. So I don't think there's a deep truth to find here about what are, quote, the basic emotions and not. But perhaps thinking about which emotions are more cross-cultural will help guide us into understanding just what they are and where they come from. And so that'll lead us to some theories of emotion. And possibly the first one I have is probably the least intuitive one. This is that emotions come as a result of your bodily action, right? So a lot of people would have thought that the reverse was the case. You feel the emotion, and then your heart palpitates, and your skin galvanic response increases, and your muscles become ready to twitch, like you see a car coming toward you. In the James Lang theory, what's actually happening is the physiology is engaged first, and the emotion follows. There's other theories of what's going on. Cannon Bard theory says that maybe there's a common cause, that the pounding heart and the fear are both caused by the car. And the Schachter-Singer two-factor theory um, actually splits up the James Lange theory a little bit more. And some of the evidence in favor of this is that there are situations where you can attach a different label to the same, like you can cause people to have a fear response and make them think that it was actually sexual arousal, um, or any number of other things that might have similar bodily presentations, which is kind of cool that you can put somebody in a rickety bridge and have a ask them how attractive the person that was asking them questions is, and they'll think, oh, they're more attractive than if that same person asked people on a non rickety bridge. It's kind of interesting. So there's these theories are going to give slightly different predictions and explanations for how emotions come about. And I don't know. I mean, when I think about this, I think that maybe there might be some one of the problems here might be that we're looking for something that applies to all emotions. And in fact, if you start thinking biologically, it might not be clear that there is a single thing called an emotion at all. There's just many things that we've labeled as emotions. And we think about emotions as something that is overwhelming, that has this physiological effect on you, and has these expressive behaviors, and maybe affects how you think about things and your conscious experience. But that might just be a label that we attach to a variety of different things that have more or less some of these effects. So my approach to this has always been thinking about how it comes about biologically, and I think other people have approached this as well. Um, People have thought about giving evolutionary explanations for emotion, right? So some people have said, okay, maybe the fight or flight response is very evolutionarily ancient, and it evolved by evolution by natural selection. And that might actually make some sense of some basic emotions like anger and fear. Um, but then you're going to need other explanations for some of the other emotions, right? So people think maybe signaling is a way that things might have evolved by natural selection. You experience joy so that people know that you are happy. Um, People know if you feel contempt for them. Um, I don't know, maybe another explanation that's completely different from either simple evolution by natural selection or signaling like the social evolution would be that actually we need emotion for some sort of if cognitive rationality. um, that I think may have the order inverted, right? It seems more plausible to think that emotions are more evolutionarily ancient than cognitive uh, aspects that than reasoning. Um, so perhaps what's going on instead is that um, some of our reasoning just started using our emotional centers. And then again, the Damasio explanation for cognitive efficiency might only apply to certain very um, minor uses of emotions. So if it didn't evolve by natural selection, you can still have an evolutionary explanation. And namely, uh, this would be something that either is um, an automatic response that evolution, they just were adapted from that. So for example, disgust, the disgust face is very similar to the face that you make when something is unpleasing. And then thinking about food being unpleasing might not just be signaling. It might be how you express societal displeasing as well, or surprise tries to get your entire body activated. That's what surprise does. So maybe that um, was adapted from some other previous behavior. Um, Another intriguing possibility might be that there was some evolutionary push early on in evolutionary history for some emotions, but that push has gone away, and so now we don't have those, or we might have emotional relics, so to speak. And then finally, it could be that um, there's no natural selection involved at all. There's just some other uh, evolution of maybe your central nervous system evolves, and at a certain level of complexity, an emotion pops up. That one's a little bit trickier to think about, but is plausible in some sense. Charles Darwin thought about this, and he actually expressed some of the things that we've already mentioned. He wrote an entire book on emotions. He was fascinated in emotions in humans and animals. And so he thought that maybe there was a principle of serviceable habits. So, for example, frowning might prevent light from entering, or raising your eyebrows might increase field of vision. So, the surprise might be sort of a good habit for when something shocking happens, to just be able to see more of your environment. Um, the antithesis of serviceable habits, Darwin thought, might also explain something. So once there's already a signal established for a serviceable habit, the opposite of it would presumably convey the opposite signal. So a confident expression and aggressive stance, the opposite of that might just be a shrug. Um, and then expressive habits, right? So maybe laughing or sighing is just how you um, signal something. I'll leave it as an exercise to you to see if you can make sense of any of Ekman's emotions or any of the other emotions from these three principles. Um, as a matter of fact, what's fascinating is that a lot of the same facial expressions, a lot of the same bodily expressions are used by multiple emotions. So maybe there's something there. We have a limited set of tools, and we tend to use them in a variety of ways, right? A smile is not always a sign of happiness. I had a close friend, let's say, um, who I don't think understood what smiles were, and would just uh, bare all of his teeth in a way to show that something amused him or made him happy. But it, it was really unnatural. It was really troubling. So smiles aren't just one emotion. Neither is anything else. All right. So we talked about what emotions are, um, whether there's basic emotions or not, whether emotions are unified in some way, maybe evolutionary history of emotions. But what about psychologically? Do they serve some psychological purpose for our lives? Um, and there are people that think that there are actually. So I've already talked about signaling in an evolutionary context, but communication might just be helpful psychologically to be able to share what moods we are in so that people know whether to approach or not approach. Catharsis was something that sort of is in line with Darwin's third hypothesis. They might also just be a byproduct of our actions and behavior. So, I mean, consider the life of a prey organism. It basically feels fear constantly, fear and waiting for fear, as opposed to a predator or an omnivore, right, which might have some more ranges. Jonathan Haidt, who we'll talk about in the next lecture, points out that it's kind of surprising and kind of good that we feel happy. We didn't have to be happy. We didn't have to feel this. Okay, I'm gonna stop this video now and maybe do the last two sections in the next video.